I stood on my own front porch on Christmas Eve and heard my daughter-in-law raise her glass. Thank God she didn't show up. I didn't go inside. I didn't say a single word. I just made one phone call, and 15 minutes later, their whole party was over. I was running late to my own family's Christmas gathering. As I reached for the cold doorknob, I heard my daughter-in-law's voice drift through the wood. Thank God she didn't come. Nobody wants her here anyway. Glasses clinked. She laughed bright and sharp. I stood there on the porch with snow drifting softly onto my coat, catching every word. My son stayed completely quiet. That silence told me everything I needed to know. My name is Clara. I'm 66, a widow for 5 years now. The house they were celebrating in, it's mine. A well-kept duplex on the edge of town. After my husband passed, I moved into the smaller ground-floor apartment so my son and his wife could have the main house. Rent-free, of course. I wanted to give them a solid start. But gratitude has a short shelf life, especially when people start mistaking kindness for something they're owed. I didn't stand there crying in the cold. Tears are wasted energy when you need it for clear decisions. I turned around, walked back to my car, and pulled out my phone. In most stories, this is where someone calls the cops or causes a huge scene, not me. I called my attorney and property manager, Mr. Weber. In that moment, he was more than just a lawyer. He was the messenger of the new reality I'd already set in motion. 15 minutes later, their party would be finished. Not with yelling or drama, but with one simple, undeniable fact. To understand how a mother ended up standing outside her own house on Christmas Eve, we need to go back a few months. It all started in late summer when I began noticing the little shifts in my own home. There weren't any big fights, just quiet, creeping disrespect. Lena had started testing my boundaries one small push at a time. And at first, I made the mistake of staying quiet to keep the peace. But peace bought with someone else's surrender isn't peace, it's just a deadline. And mine had finally run out that December night. That August, Lena started treating the shared spaces like they belonged to her alone. It began with small things. My flower pots on the back patio got quietly swapped out for her sleek gray concrete ones without a word. When I mentioned it, she gave me that patient little smile people use on confused old ladies. It just looks so much cleaner, Clara. You don't have to mess with all that dirt anymore, she said, already turning back to her laptop. My son sat right there and just nodded. He's always been the type who'd rather disappear than take a side. A few weeks later, I noticed the spare key to my apartment was missing from the hook in the hallway. I asked my son about it. Lena answered for him. Oh, I took it in case of an emergency, or if we need something from the basement while you're asleep. An emergency in my own house, without asking. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, but I stayed perfectly calm. I didn't explain or argue. The next morning, I called a locksmith and had my locks changed, paid for it myself. When Lena showed up at my door a week later, irritated that her key didn't work, I opened it with a coffee cup in my hand. The old lock was sticking, I said evenly. I had a new one put in. And where's our new key? She snapped. In my pocket, I answered and gently closed the door. There was no big fight, no shouting, but in that moment, she realized I wasn't the frail pushover she'd hoped for. I wasn't giving up my space. She didn't respond with understanding. She started planning how to make me feel exactly who she thought was really in charge. She wanted to keep enjoying my financial generosity while offering zero respect in return. What she didn't know was that I'd already started reviewing my statements and quietly cutting off every automatic payment for their daily conveniences. After the lock incident, the air in the house got a lot colder. Lena began treating me like an annoying neighbor in my own backyard. She'd invite friends over for cookouts without telling me. They'd sit on the patio my late husband built, drinking wine and acting like I was invisible. Instead of getting mad, I used that time at my desk going through old files. It was eye-opening how many ongoing expenses I was still covering for them. The pricey insurance on their second car, the weekly cleaning service for the main house, all those food delivery subscriptions. Everything was still running on my account. I'd set it up years ago to help my son through college. Now he was in his early 30s, making decent money, but the charges kept rolling. Lena bought expensive clothes and ordered packages every week while I carried the baseline cost of their lifestyle. I didn't march over to complain or cry. I simply called my bank. By lunchtime, I'd canceled the car insurance payments, ended the cleaning contract for the main house, and stopped every subscription. Everything was strictly separate now. If they wanted to live like owners, they could start paying owner bills. 3 days later, when their car sat there uninsured, my son knocked on my door looking panicked. "Mom," the insurance company emailed, "the payment didn't go through. Lena needs the car for work." I looked at him calmly. "I stopped the automatic payment for your car, Marcus. You're both adults. You can handle it yourselves." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "But that's going to cost us hundreds extra a month." "Then you'll need to budget better," I said, closing the door gently and going back to my book. I'm sure Lena was raging next door, but that was no longer my problem. I'd cut the financial umbilical cord quietly and for good. It was the first real moment they felt my patience had run out. I didn't need to raise my voice to win. But Lena's counterattack came fast. Her response was subtle but clear. She started systematically freezing me out of family life. Sundays, when I used to come over for coffee, the door was suddenly locked. If I was out pruning my roses, she'd loudly call for Marcus to come inside, like my mere presence was an inconvenience. She painted me as the villain, a bitter old woman making her son's life difficult. My son, always conflict-averse, barely spent time with me anymore. When we crossed paths in the driveway, he'd look at the ground and mumble quick excuses. I could have been sad. I could have knocked on their door, begging for love and attention. A lot of mothers my age do exactly that. They let themselves be humiliated just to keep seeing their kids or grandkids. But I saw the situation crystal clear. Lena wanted me isolated, so I'd eventually give up and hand her full control. So I didn't respond with words. I responded with action. I spent more time with my own friends, took classes, and built my own social circle. Most importantly, I quietly had the true market value of my property assessed. One afternoon, a dark sedan pulled up. Mr. Weber, the real estate expert I trusted, stepped out. Lena watched suspiciously from the kitchen window as we walked the property. We spoke softly, took notes, and he nodded approvingly at the roof's condition. I caught Lena's face behind the glass. She probably thought I was planning renovations. She had no idea I'd already signed the first papers. I was building my quiet, structured exit. I knew the decisive moment was coming, and I wanted to be perfectly ready. The holidays were approaching fast, and with them came Lena's biggest mistake. She decided to throw a huge Christmas Eve party to show off her perfect life right there in my house, using the money they had saved by living off me. For her, it was supposed to be the crowning moment of her little kingdom. A fatal mistake. By mid-December, Lena had completely immersed herself in planning the party. Delivery vans arrived at the house every day. Expensive catering, rented furniture, enormous floral arrangements, everything disappeared into the main house. And the most absurd part was that all of it was happening inside a house that belonged to me while I was being carefully pushed out of the family's life. I never received a real invitation. Instead, one day my son muttered while passing by, "You know Lena's people are coming over on Christmas Eve. It'll probably get pretty loud. Maybe you'd rather have a quiet evening in front of the TV." He couldn't even look me in the eye. He knew exactly what he was doing. I simply smiled calmly. "Don't worry about my evening, Marcus. I already have plans." He looked visibly relieved and hurried back into the house. Meanwhile, my own preparations were already complete. The agreement to sell the duplex had been signed. The buyers, an older doctor couple, had agreed to take possession right after New Year's. Legally, everything was very simple. There was no official lease agreement. That meant I could terminate their free living arrangement at any time. No courts, no months of legal battles, just my signature, property ownership, and complete emotional clarity. On the afternoon of Christmas Eve, I calmly packed my important documents and a few personal belongings into small boxes. My apartment was neat and ready. Outside, I could already hear the laughter of the first guests, the clinking of dishes, and Christmas music pouring from the windows of my house. They were celebrating in rooms they had neither bought nor earned. I put on my best black coat, added a touch of red lipstick, and picked up my purse. I decided I wasn't hiding anymore. This evening was going to be unforgettable, just not in the way Lena imagined. I grabbed my keys and the official envelope I had prepared, then stepped into the cold December air. The party was already in full swing, and at that exact moment, I stopped being the silent observer. There I stood on my own porch in the cold while inside Lena raised her glass. Thank God she didn't come. Nobody wants her here anyway. The guests laughed. Years ago, that moment would have broken my heart. I would have cried quietly, walked away, and spent weeks doubting myself. But that night I felt only icy clarity. There was no bond left strong enough to hold me back. No misplaced loyalty to a son who allowed his wife to humiliate the woman who had given him everything. I didn't open the door to create drama. I didn't beg for love. Like I said before, I simply called Mr. Weber. He wasn't coming to threaten anyone or involve the police. He came as my representative for the sale of the house, to deliver one simple but powerful document. An official notice terminating their right to live there for free and informing them that the property had changed ownership.